All right, welcome back to our Faith and Revelation class. This is chapter 7, and this is part 3. We've been looking at Christ and how Christ is part of God's revelation to us through the Scriptures over the last 3 chapters. This is part 3. So we're looking at the end of Christ's life, His passion, or suffering, His death, and His resurrection. We're going to look at what does that reveal to us about who God is, right? And so just a little bit of a review. We looked last time at how Christ reveals Himself and does God, how God shows us who God is through these things of Christ, through what Christ taught. Christ is saying, this is who I am, I'm revealing myself. It's like in a relationship, if you tell the other person when you're talking on the phone or you're texting or whatever, this is who I am, so you're teaching. Then it's also, though, how Christ taught, right? With that authority that He taught, that even in and of itself convinced a lot of people that this is who God is, and this is God revealing Himself. Through the miracles that Christ worked in His life while He was on earth and walking amongst us, that reveals much about God to us. That God comes to and is beyond the world, is beyond the natural order of things. It has supernatural power. Also through exorcisms, right, which is a type of miracle. God is showing to us that God desires to drive out of the world, drive evil, and supplant it. And so that reveals a lot about God to us. God reveals that God desires to go out to other people because of all of these times in which Jesus goes to the sinners and He goes to the outcasts and He has meals with them and He cares for them and He walks with them. Still challenges them in their sins. He doesn't back away from their sinfulness. He still calls them out of those sins and away from that stuff. But He goes to them. And so that is a revelation to us about who God is and how God operates, right? And then through His private teachings that He gives to the 12 apostles, that too is a revelation to us about who God is. We get some special insights in the Scriptures when we hear these private lessons. That's God revealing Himself to His friends in a special way. As we move into this chapter, we're moving now again towards the end of the life of Christ and then, of course, His resurrection as well. But really important, we've talked about this in previous years, but this is super important when we talk about the Last Supper, which really kind of kicks off, right? Holy Thursday, now in the church, the 3 days, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and then, of course, Easter Sunday as well. So this kind of kicks off the events of Christ's suffering, right? The Last Supper. And again, it's super important to know that the Last Supper occurs in the context of the Jewish Passover meal, which has been celebrated for 1,300 years already, right? 1,300 years before Christ was when the first Passover happens, where Moses says, paint your doorposts with blood, eat this lamb, right? And then have this meal with unleavened bread, right? And a little bit maybe to drink as well. But, so the apostles and Jesus are gathering to celebrate this Passover meal that's been it's the highest holiday for the Jewish people. They're gathering, they're eating this special meal together, right? In the midst of that, within that ritual, Jesus, though, breaks from tradition part of the way through and establishes and says, I am creating a new covenant. There's going to be a new Passover where now the angel of death will always pass over my people who are living in me, right? So He sets these things up. He says to the apostles, He says, take and eat, this is my body. So this point where they would normally eat this bread in the Passover meal, He says, this is my body. And then He takes a cup, and there was drinking several different chalices, several different cups of wine throughout the Passover was part of the tradition. It says at one point He takes a cup and he gives thanks and then says to them, drink this, all of you, for this is the blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. So He's saying, this is my blood, right? So He takes the Jewish Passover meal and He gives it a new meaning and a new purpose, now saying He's the lamb, right? And that the bread becomes His body, the wine becomes His blood, and so it's given a new meaning. We even hear this reference to, when He goes out after the Last Supper, He goes out and it says He's praying and He prays that this chalice might be taken away, right? This is the agony in the garden, right? Where the angel comes to Him and Jesus is so afraid and nervous that He sweats blood, right? Jesus goes to the garden, and he says, remain here and keep watch. And then it says that he advanced a little and fell to the ground and prayed that if it was possible, the hour might pass by him. He said, Abba, Father, if all things are possible to you, take this cup away from me, right? So there's this notion of this chalice, this cup of suffering that's going to be coming, right? He knows what it is, and he refers to it as a cup, right? Which is, again, a continuation that he's saying that the Jewish Passover meal that we were celebrating I started to give a new meaning. It's still ongoing because this other cup has not been consumed, right? And so the cup itself is the suffering, and Jesus says, I want that to pass, right? It also says, when they come to arrest Jesus in the garden, Jesus says, put your sword away. Should I not drink the cup which the Father has given to me, right? So again, there's this reference that this Passover meal is now being extended through the crucifixion. And Jesus is saying, I don't want this cup, but I will, if God wills this, then I will obey. So we're going to continue this image and this re-understanding of the Passover as we go through this. But of course, we also then understand that God is revealed in the crucifixion, which will take place the next day, right? So, continuing this Passover connection, the crucifixion is an extension of this meal. It says, moments before his death, this is your textbook here, an onlooker offered him a sponge of sour wine, it was wine, right, which he raised to Christ's lips on a branch of hyssop, right? Hyssop is the same herb that was used for placing the blood of the Passover lamb on the wood of the homes in the Israelites in the first Passover. So, Christ is given wine to drink as he's dying off of a hyssop, which the hyssop was what was used to spread blood on the wood in the first Passover, right? Now, of course, it's being touched to the lamb and the blood of the actual Passover lamb in Jesus Christ, okay? Christ drinks the wine off of that and declares it is finished, right? The new Passover had been completed. The new lamb had been slaughtered for mankind. And so all of this imagery would have made total sense to all of the Jewish people who had come up for the last 1,300 years. And in fact, hopefully it would become apparent to people who are still celebrating the Passover meal, the first Passover meal, our Jewish brothers and sisters as well. There's so many parallels here. All right. God also reveals a lot about himself to us, though, in the crucifixion, in the sense that we also see that our God chose suffering, right? That reveals something about God to us as well. This fact that our God, who could have died in his sleep or whatever, could have had to be a really quick, painless death type of thing in which God dies, God chose the most agonizing, awful torture and suffering. And so it should strengthen us when we suffer, right? This fact that we see all of these things happening to God, that God chose this, God is showing this is the way, right? This is what I want you to do as well. When you're suffering, know that, and so all the Beatitudes start to make sense. Blessed are you who are poor, blessed are you when you suffer, blessed are you when you're sorrowful, right? All these teachings of God begin to make sense even more when we see God choose it on his own and to choose to go through it, okay? It's a beautiful painting here, a beautiful image of the resurrection. Of course, the women showing up at the tomb and the angel telling them that he is not here. Okay, but so in the resurrection itself, we also see things that that God reveals things to us in the resurrection, of course, right? That's why we're all at Mass on Easter Sunday, right? It shows us so much about God. One of the things it shows us, God's greater than death, right? That God, if God had said all these things and everything had happened, but then God died and didn't raise from the dead like he said he would, well, that would tell us a lot about God. But this resurrection event confirms everything that God had said, right? It makes him, he's true, he tells the truth, he did what he said he would. And so this is very important, obviously, for us as followers of Christ. It also shows us, as St. Paul will go on to teach, and many other people as well, right, that Christ's resurrection shows that if we live in him and we die in him, then we will be resurrected like he was, right? And so the resurrection reveals God, and also God's plan for us is revealed in the resurrection. And of course, it reveals to us that Jesus was and is God, right? Jesus kept his word, he told the truth, all these things. So the resurrection, again, had Jesus, there were lots of people that came and said, I'm the Messiah, and maybe even worked miracles or what looked like miracles and had really good teaching and all that kind of stuff. But when they didn't resurrect from the dead, right? That's something that Jesus did, and so that's why, again, it's very revealing to us about God. Okay, questions for this chapter. If someone asked you, what are the relationships between the Passover meal and the Last Supper and Crucifixion that were celebrated 1,300 years after the first Passover meal, what would you say in a paragraph? How would you explain the comparisons in one paragraph to people who are asking you, what does the Last Supper and the death of Christ have to do with the Passover meal? The second question, and our only other question, what does the resurrection reveal to us about God? Okay, what does the resurrection of Christ from the dead reveal to us about God? Okay, these are our questions. This is our chapter for today. I hope and pray that you're doing well, that you're continuing to read your scripture, that you're continuing to pray every day, that you are praying a rosary, hopefully as well, asking our Blessed Mother to intercede for you and for those that you love, offering her and asking her to pray for some intentions that might be needed and necessary in your life that you're struggling with. If I can ever do anything, please contact me, let me know. I'm happy to meet, happy to do spiritual direction, happy to pray with you, happy to hear a confession. Whatever it is that you need, let me know. I'm here for you and I'm praying for you. Hope that you're doing well. Have a great week. God bless.